Roger Hall here from New Zealand. He has been 30 years, Roger, shaping boards, and applied what he's learned to his craft there with wooden boards as well. And he makes some of the, well, most intricate looking wooden boards that I've seen around anyway. We've got Tom Wagner, synonymous with the Alaya and finless boards here in Australia, now worldwide. And also, obviously, Tom made lots of other wooden boards as well. Mike Connor started out building ukuleles and guitars, and then has now moved into wooden surfboards as well. So the three of them have quite different approaches to how they go about building wooden boards, and pretty much that's what tonight's about, is for them to give a bit of an overview on their approach and their interest in wooden boards, and maybe how they got into it, where they feel that it's going, what they're experimenting with, and then after each one of them's pretty much presented that, sort of open it up for you to ask the questions that you want to know about that area of their board building, so that we can perhaps demystify some of the myths and legends and unknowns of building wooden surfboards.
Point to Tom and Mike, in that my day job, if you like, is I'm a surfboard shaper, and I've been doing that since I was 13 years old. So I basically shape boards out of foam. 17 years ago, I went to the Oxbow longboard contest in Hawaii, and I decided to make, the state-of-the-art, high-performance, super lightweight, progressive longboard to go and see what I could do. And I didn't do very well in the contest, but the board was the best board I'd ever made, and was my favourite board, and just a fantastic board, and that was really good. That was 1993, and I'd sort of had this idea of making a wooden board for quite a long time, and I'd been collecting agave stalks for quite a while, and had a little bit of a stash, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to make this wooden board, and just as a little bit of an experiment, and to give the project a bit of direction, I decided to copy this super lightweight foam board that I really liked out of agave wood. And I really put a lot of effort into making a very, very faithful copy. And I was absolutely blown away that this wooden board could be so much heavier than, it was relatively light for a wooden board, but it was a lot heavier than the super light high performance longboard that I'd been riding. And I was absolutely blown away at how well this board went. In so many ways, it surprised me in ways that I never ever dreamt. The first thing was, I didn't even really know whether it was going to float. So I made the thing, nervously took it to the beach. Yeah, wood floats, but hey, you should have seen my woodwork projects at school. My mother reminded me the other day that at the end of school I used to bring home my woodwork projects and sneak them in the house and hide them in the wardrobe so my dad wouldn't see them. So I haven't always been a woodworker. Well, anyway, this board did float, and it paddled great. And the first thing I noticed was it duck dived better than my foam board, and I kind of thought, well, maybe that's just a quirky, fluky thing, but it just seemed every time I went under a wave that it duck dived better than my foam board, and I thought, what's going on here? And I put it down to the fact that it didn't have the same corky buoyancy as polyurethane foam blank, and it just seemed to sit under the wave, out of the turbulence, for just that little bit longer, and then it popped up. So that was something I never would have dreamt. The next thing I found was paddling into waves, the board just seemed to have more motor, and it had this really nice sure-footed kind of feel to it as you drop down a wave, and it was always there for you at the bottom. So right from paddling the board to my first takeoff, I was discovering things like just bang, bang, bang. And that really surprised me, and I found out all kinds of things, and I rode that board for 2 years non-stop, and in the end I just had to get off it, because as a shaper I wasn't experimenting anymore. It's kind of like, oh, I didn't need another board, so I had to stop riding it. But the other thing I did at that time was I was so intrigued by the weight and how could this board be so, you know, fast and lively compared to the foam one that I'd copied. So the next board I made, I deliberately made it considerably heavier, and what I did is I made it out of balsa wood, but what I did is I put hardwood rails on it, like really heavy hardwood rails, and the board was heavy, you know, but it was a very progressive shape, had a lot of rocker in it, and something that I found, you know, well, okay, I won't digress just yet. But what I started off to say was I put heavy hardwood rails on this board, and what I found was, okay, you drop into a wave, you lay it on rail to do your bottom turn, and what the board did is just flipped onto its rail really quickly because the weight was in the rail, and then it held a really nice line. And then when you wanted to, you know, come out of the turn and go onto the other rail, it flipped onto that rail. I mean, I use the word flip, but it's really smooth but really quick. So from that time on, I never bothered about making another lightweight surfboard again. And, you know, even when I make my foam boards, I always say to my glasser, you know, don't worry about making it light. And I already pretty much predetermined the fact that they're not going to be light, because I either put like hardwood stringers in them, or big piece of wood, or multiple stringers. And when I say multiple stringers, I don't mean 3 or 4. You know, I like to put like 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever. Like, you know, get lots of wood in there. Or what I'll do is I'll put wooden rails on the board. And so even my foam boards are kind of almost wooden boards. And I've just found that that weight is really a powerful design ingredient that I think it started disappearing from surfboards in the 50s, and we've pretty much been on this one-way track of getting the weight out of surfboards and out of surfing, and we've had to bring it back for tow boards, and we've had to bring it back for like recreating old school nose riders and stuff. But apart from that, it's really one-way track. Not in every situation. I mean, light is right, but I've found that weight is a very, very potent design element, and I think the road ahead is going to see weight come back into surfing, and this wooden board thing that's happening is going to really help to turn a lot of people onto that. So, bearing in mind that I'm not particularly interested in making a lightweight board, my approach to making a wooden board is not to go through the stack of timber and pull out all the lightest pieces, because for a start, once you've done that, you haven't got any more light wood. And secondly, I didn't want a light board anyway. So that's freed me up to explore a lot more different species of wood and play around more with kind of medium weight timbers. And you can mix it up with light stuff as well, so that, you know, you can still control the overall weight of the board. So this board, for instance, got 9 different species of wood. And I'm really attracted to that principle, because you can play around, you know, aesthetically with the board, and you can 9 different species of wood gives me 9 different colours, 9 different grains, 9 different textures. So you can have a lot of fun, and you probably get, you know, a little bit self-indulgent in it. But I think when owning a surfboard, you know, okay, it's a functional tool for wave riding, but you can also have something that's a real pleasure to own. And you spend a lot of time sitting out there bobbing up and down waiting for a wave, and it's just so much fun to be on a board that, you know, you get that pleasure out of owning. The other thing that I think is a little bit different about the way that I've ended up approaching these boards is what I've realised, that wooden boards are really strong. So, you know, there's plenty of wood running from nose to tail, there's plenty of longitudinal strength. So I started to think about it, and I thought, well, really a lot of the blank is just a filler. It's just there to hold the form or the shape of the board. So I started mucking around with making different patterns in the board, like instead of having all the wood running from nose to tail, having some of the wood running across the board. And what that meant, it opens up all sorts of possibilities aesthetically, and like, I'll agree, this is pretty busy, it's a little bit over the top, but, you know, I had to go there, you know.
I don't think so, Rog.
they're all experimental, and I had to go there. I've got that out of my system a little bit now. But the other advantage with making up beams where you're using wood going laterally across the board is you can get right away from relying on using commercially milled timbers. And what I mean by that is, if a branch breaks off a tree in your grandmother's backyard, you can have a look at it, and if it looks interesting, woods to balance it out. So this board is made in a completely different way to what Tom's doing and to what Mike's doing. This is made by making beams of wood which are glued together to make a wooden blank. And the thing I like about that is you can make the blank whatever shape you want. So you can make the blank the right shape to make the surfboard out of, which means you don't have the kind of restrictions where you know, if you want to have a deep concave and then go straight into a chine, you know, you don't have those sort of tensions because you're shaping the contours into the board. The beams that the board's made up out of, in this case, they're about 50mm wide beams. And I chamber the beams out, which removes roughly 50% of the weight. So this board here weighs about 8 kgs, which for a 5'11" surfboard is pretty heavy. It's more the weight of something between a sort of an 8 and a 9 foot board probably. But don't be too put off by the fact that the board weighs 8 kgs. The one that I've got, that I've been riding for the last couple of years, it's very, very similar to this. It weighs 8 kgs. Every time I pick the board up and put it under my arm, I feel the weight and I go, oh, yeah, there's that weight again. You know, it's a pretty heavy board. And I guarantee, if you all came up one at a time and picked the board up, you'd go, oh yeah, that's pretty heavy. And some of you'd probably be really surprised at how heavy it is. But every time I pick the board up and put it under my arm, I feel that weight. But what never fails to amaze me every time I use it is I put that board on the water and I look at it, and then I jump on it and I start paddling. And I go out and I have a fantastic surf, and it's not till I come back in and pick the board up and put it under my arm again that I even think about the weight. The weight just isn't there when I'm surfing it. And my way of explaining it is because the board's chambered, and because of my idea about putting the weight on the rails, the centre of the board is basically very light and buoyant because that's where the chambers are, so there's a lot of air in there. The outside of the board is heavy and not very buoyant, being that it's solid timber. So you're standing on something that's light and buoyant, you're going really fast because of the momentum of the board, and when you go on a rail, it goes on rail really quick. The rails sink really quickly and they sit in the water. It's just silky smooth. This board's got a 17.5-inch wide tail, which is a pretty wide tail, and it'll hold an edge on a steep face, no problem at all. It's